Hey everyone, welcome to the Cozy Junk Studio. This is Sharon. I am so glad to be back. It's been a few days since I've been able to work on a video. I've been working in my studio, trying to get it together. Today we are going to work on these cloches. We're going to start off with these lampshades. We're going to remove this fabric and then we're going to have the metal bases. These bases can be used for so many things other than just for lampshades. One of the things, or a couple of things that I will use them for is, one, to make a base for a tray or a riser. Also, another way to use them is, like I said, I'm going to use one of them for a cloche. In other words, more like a little surround that you can put a decorative item in the middle of it. That's what I consider a cloche to be. Honestly, I don't know what the definition is of a cloche. I just know it's more like a closure going over something that you want to showcase. So that's what we're doing in this video. I was trying to pull together some different types of things to use as decorative displays. So I'm just cutting this fabric off here. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off all three of them, so when I do need one, they'll already be ready to go. Most of the bases, or most lampshades, do have a metal base in them. However, I did notice when I was at some of the Goodwills and I was looking, some of them only have a top ring and a bottom ring. They don't have the metal pieces that connect them together. So watch out for that when you are out looking for lampshades, that they do have the metal pieces that connect the top and the bottom part of the shade. Okay, so we have got pretty much all the fabric off, and now we are going to work on some pieces that's going to go inside of the cloches. I dug through my stash and I found a few pieces or a few trinkets that I have that I want to make a little bit more shabby, cottage looking. So what I'm going to do is add some paint, and I'm going to also add some texture to these. What I'm going to use is wall spackling. It's called a lot of different things, but it fills holes. You can get it in large 5-gallon buckets or 10-gallon buckets, or I don't know. We have a large bucket where we've been doing a lot of home renovations. So what I did was I just scooped some out, put it in a bowl, and put it in my studio to use as I needed it for something. I started painting that with white chalk paint, and then I thought, no, I'm going to put gray on there as a base and then go back over it with the white. So this is the bottom of a Waverly elephant. So it's very thick, and that's what I'm using as the base under here. This next piece is a glass stopper. I want to keep it clear, but I thought it'd be cool to paint the top of this gray with a little white and then sand it back some. So that's what I did with this piece. And that's kind of what I do with most of these pieces. I give them a base of either the gray or the white chalk paint and then go back in with either color or neither, and I just sand them back. So this next piece, I love these little pocket clocks, and I do love the brown and the traditional just vintage style, but I want to make this a little shabby. We're just going to do the same thing. We're going to give it a base coat of the white chalk paint, and then we're going to sand it back some. I'm just going to continue adding the white chalk paint and possibly gray on these. I do go ahead and add the white back to the top of that gray clear glass stopper, and then to our gold finial. I'm adding a little bit of white to this world, and we're going to sand that back some, and we're going to white wax the globe. That'll be coming up soon. I had this birdhouse already painted white, and I went back in and just added some of that really thick gray paint to it to give it some more texture. We're going to finish these off with this white chalk paint. And in the end, I'm not sure if I show it, but I do go in and wax these a little bit with some waxes. I found these cute little angels, and one had this buttercream tint and the other one had just a white gray tint. So I decided to go with that and add the corresponding color clay paint. And what I'm going to use is DIY vintage linen and white swan. On these little cherubs, I also found this St. Patrick's Cathedral, paint it that vintage linen. Now let's get into the nitty gritty and put these cloches together. So this first piece is a metal house-like piece that I got. I think I paid $2 for it. And then I have a set of cutting boards. There was 4 hanging on this post thing. I think there was 4, maybe more. It was like a little charcuterie kit from maybe the 70s. It was really adorable. It's funny how that thing is back in style. So I have these little legs, and that was a post that my husband cut up for me at one time a few years ago, and I hadn't used them. So I'm just going to glue these on the bottom with some Tite Bond wood glue, and I'm going to dab just a little bit of really hot, high temp glue, hot glue in the center, and press down just to get my stability so that the legs will stay in place and set overnight to get solid. Now I know my little house is already black metal, but I'm going to take some black ink from Waverly, I think that's what I have here, to just layer on a thin coat. I'm not even going to worry about getting it all over. I'm just kind of going over it to give it a little bit of a shabby look and have a painted look to it. And it also gives it a little bit of age. For the base, I'm going to use this DIY weathered wood, and you all, this is my most favorite color of paint right now out of all my paints. It is just gorgeous, and I'm just lightly putting this on here, making it a see-through coat because we're going to sand this, and I'm spraying some water on it because I don't want it to be, I just want it to almost act like a stain, but a little bit deeper than a stain. So the water is going to keep it from getting too thick and that wood not showing through. I love how this turns out. This base is one of my most favorite projects I've done in a while. Let me know in the comments what you all think. So this next part is going to be slowed down so you all can see how this dries into this beautiful weathered wood look. Now don't forget that the DIY clay paints do dry lighter than they go on, and that gives you the color that is gorgeous. Now let's add some DIY white wax to this. This really just changes it so much. And I just want to let you all know there's all kinds of cut marks. These boards were heavily used and I love it. There's also that hole for the hanging, and I left it because I don't care. I want this to look like a salvaged, remade piece with these janky legs that's just been cut by hand. You all, I just love it. I'm gonna go ahead, and once I finish waxing this, I'm gonna add some Mod Podge as a clear coat to seal in the chalk paint and the wax. This is not necessary, but I wanted it to just blend better together, and I feel like the Mod Podge does that. I just want to remind you all that you can slow these videos down on YouTube. I do speed them up just so you can see some of the process, but you don't have to live through all of the things that are just over and over the same thing. Next, we're going to add a stencil to this piece. I will link the stencils, what I can find on Amazon, in the description box below. I finally decide on this cool French, which I think they're all French, but this one here. And we're only going to use pieces of it. Don't forget with your stencils, you don't have to use them as is. You can multiply, multiple, pull from one, pull from another to get the design that you want. So I'm going to be using the FOLKART Cottage White color. And I have had several comments of how my stencils look so perfect. Okay, so YouTube, to me, makes them look more perfect than they are. When I do pull it up, there is some bleeding around them. Now, not much, but it doesn't matter. Don't stress too much about the stenciling, because if you're going to go back in and distress, you're going to remove some of that, and it's not going to look like it was not in the lines. I promise. Just practice with it. You can do the swirl. I do some of that, and I do the tapping. I find that the swirl leaves the marks that I don't really care, so if I do swirl, I go back over and tap to give it more of a stenciled versus like I took a brush and made swirl marks, if that makes sense. So now that I've dried this a little bit with my heat gun, I'm going to use this crown from this bee stencil, and I'm going to put it right below the top lettering, right in the center, and just put it in between the two lines. Now we're going to use our original stencil, and we're going to flip it upside down and use some of the motifs on the corners. We're going to sand this back just a little bit, and we're going to add some black wax over it, and this piece is done. This next piece is a little house that I painted with the weathered wood DIY paint. And if you guys remember in my one of my haul videos, this had a test tube sticking out the top of it. So we're just going to stencil on this as well. We're going to use some of the, I think this is the Waverly, I don't know if it's cottage white, but it's one of the Waverly white type chalk paints. And I'm going to dry that real good, give it a little bit of a sand and some dark wax, and this house ends up looking so cute. I am going to leave that hole in the top of this. Again, I don't care if this looks like an old architecture piece that had some screws in it or just a hole. It doesn't matter. You can also use that later for something like a twig to stick out of the top of it, something cool. Now, I do end up starting to add white wax to this, and then I think, ooh, I don't really like that. And as I try to wipe it off, I really ended up liking how it looked, so I left it on there. It kind of gave the roof a little bit of a old cracked look. For this next piece, we're going to use a metal bird cage looking thing. I don't know. It came with a base on it and it was hanging on a hook. But we're going to use this as a top part of a cloche with a candlestick. Now, we're also going to paint this candlestick the same color, except for we're not going to paint the whole thing. We're just going to add some weathered wood to it and then blend it with wet distressing. I flipped this upside down and used the bottom of it as the top because it just looked better with the metal part from our faux bird cage. So I'm taking this piece off the bottom and then I'm going to paint over that. When I am putting this paint on there, this weather wood, you'll see that it dries lighter than the candlestick. The candlestick itself is actually a chocolate color, not quite black, but when I go to wet distress this and then white wax it, it just blends in so beautifully. Now don't forget to comment below which one of these projects is your favorite and which one you might try. Also, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, give me a like, and subscribe to this channel if you like this content so I can bring you more content like this. Now, we're not going to forget our cage, and we're going to add some white wax to it. Now, don't forget the photos of this at the end of this video to see the end result. Our next piece is going to be this bird cage. I got 2 of these in a haul, and they have a hook in the center that can hold a little candle holder, but I'm not going to use the hook just now, but I'm going to use this as a next metal cloche. And that little square sign from the Dollar Tree, we're going to use that as our base, and we're going to put some legs on it. I'm just deconstructing this, and I'm actually sanding and putting some divots and like some worn places in it and little dings with my hammer to give it a little bit of a vintage look. I'm going to sand some of those corners to make it not so square. I'm just going to take my box of beads and get some larger ones to use as the feet on these. I'm using TITE Bond wood glue and a little bit of hot glue to give them a little bit of a hold while the wood glue dries overnight. We're going to give this a good coat of this vintage linen DIY clay paint. I'm going to add some clear wax to this since this piece is already white. I will have the products linked below that I'm using, the clear wax. Anything that you can purchase off Amazon will be in the links below. And then I'm adding a little bit of black wax just to tone that white down. I did put some white wax on the black bird cage. I did not add a coat of black to this cage, even though it was black metal. It had a texture on it already. This next cloche, I'm using this piece that I got for $2.99 at a thrift store, and I'm adding a crown to the top of this. The crown is actually a base of a snow globe, as you can see in this video, and then I'm adding a dice that I've painted gray that has a tiny crown on top. I thought this would make a gorgeous top piece for this cloche. For the base of this cloche, I had started off with adding some of that gray thick chalk paint to give it some texture just in a few places. And then I'm going to add this white Swan by DIY. It's kind of a buttery color and it's so pretty. So we're going to do that to the base of this, and then we're going to attach this. Well, we're not really going to attach it. We're going to use a candle holder as its base, and we're going to paint that the same color. Now this piece does have a light inside, And I end up cutting that away because it really was getting in the way, and I knew that I would probably never put batteries and use this. Okay, so let's talk about this crown. So I had this dice that had this crown attached to it, and there was some letters on it, but I went over it with that thick chalk paint in gray, and now I'm just sanding back to get some of that buttery cream original color of the dice back. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some more back to it from my paintbrush with that white swan on it. I'm also adding some of the white swan to both of the crown pieces, just to make them blend in with the base of the white swan of the holder of the cloche. Wow, that was a mouthful. We're going to use some E6000 to attach the metal to the top of this glass, and it works perfectly. I just let it set up overnight, and when I first put it on there, I make sure that my crown is centered and doesn't slip or slide. I actually hold it for just a few seconds, and it stays in place, believe it or not, and doesn't slide at all. When I was putting the E6000 on here, you can see that I did get some of it on the glass, so I used some alcohol. I always buy 90 or 99% proof, and it wipes away almost anything. For the base of this, we're going to go ahead and use the white swan, the same color as the wood round that is there for the cloche. I'm not going to attach these because I may want to use this separately, so I don't really need to attach them together. The cloche and that wood round will sit nicely on top of this. So I'm just putting a couple coats of this white swan on here, and then we're going to wet distress this back for a nice finish. And we're going to go ahead and sand the base of the cloche because we kind of want it to blend with the base, or the candlestick base. And to do that, both of them are going to be distressed, wet distressed and sanded as well. So we have to add some wax to these, and since this is more of a buttery color, I'm going to go ahead and start with white wax to give it a base, or the dark or the black wax to go on top of it. So that I really want to do the black wax because there is gray in the base of the wood round, and then there's also gray in that crown. So the black wax is ultimately mixed with that white wax is going to give us a gray haze that's going to blend those together. Our final project is going to be a lampshade, skeleton shade, and a piece of brass, or it's a brass candle, pillar candle holder. I'm just flattening the top part of this shade. I cut the loop off, but I'm leaving the bar at the top in case I want to use that later to add a knob or something. I'm going to make this pretty simple. I'm just cleaning this up. I go ahead and start scraping the candle wax off of this, and I really regret it after I get most of it off. I think, oh, I should have left that. So I left what was left, if that makes sense, because I'm going to white wax this, and when I white wax it, that wax texture that's left grabs onto that white wax, and it just looks so cool. So for future reference, I will probably not, if I want a lot of texture, I'll probably just leave the gunk on there, especially if it's not gross. I mean, it was just wax. So I'm going to go ahead and wax this whole piece. And I do add just a little bit of some white swan paint to this, I think, or just some chalk paint where the wax wouldn't grab as well. And then I go ahead and paint the shade, or the skeleton shade, the same color. And now I'm going to add some of this rub and buff, and I think I use the golden antique or antique gold. This comes in a 3-pack from Amazon, and I will link this below as well. I do mix two together. I think it's the new gold and the old gold. And I just kind of hit it in random places, rubbing on some of that wax and the white wax. I really love how this turned out, and it was just the simplest one that I made. Now don't forget, the photos are coming up. Subscribe to this channel. Let me know if you like these videos. Comment below and tell me which one was your favorite. And I hope to see you in the next video. The next video is going to feature the new IOD products that I've ordered, and I can't wait to see you all.